Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we wish to discuss with you a new subject that has taken the attention of many people in communications, and it's a very controversial issue. Because of modern technology, a number of people, particularly in rural areas throughout the United States, have been able to purchase dishes in which they can pick up signals from not only the major networks in this country, but from many other parts of the world. CBS has led the movement, along with activities by NBC, ABC, and PBS, to look at the possibility of scrambling signals of their broadcast so that those people who purchase dishes are not able to pick up part of their program, and maybe in the end all of their programming. It has created a controversy between those networks, cable systems, and also private owners of dishes. A new organization has emerged from this controversy, and it's located here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's a corporation called Stop Scrambling Incorporated. In fact, it happens to be headquartered here in Idaho. We've invited two members from that organization to come today to discuss the organization while they're opposing these new policies by some of the major networks in broadcasting within the United States. I first introduced to you Mr. John Caldwell, who is the president of the board of directors of Stop Scrambling Incorporated. John Caldwell has been in that position since the creation of this corporation. John, welcome to our program.
Hello.
I'm happy to welcome also Idaho State Representative Jeannie Givens, who is also very involved with this organization, and she's in charge of public relations and fundraising and has assisted the president in traveling throughout the area in recruiting members and financing. And it's my understanding as we proceed with the program today, they have some comments to make about possible litigation. As always, I'm very happy to welcome regular panelists back for another program, and that is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of Public Relations and Foundation Matters at North Idaho College. And I shall ask Steve Schenck to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. A toss-up question for either one of you. Could you give? I'm not familiar with the group, although I am familiar with the issue. Could you give us a little background about Stop Scrambling, how large the organization is, what some of its objectives are, and how it came to be organized?
Well, it came to be organized, first of all, last April. A bunch of angry dish owners got together down at Templin's Resort in Post Falls, Idaho, and had a meeting to see what they could do about it, and they decided that they would take CBS to court and try and prevent their scrambling and denial of CBS's signal. And Stop Scrambling Incorporated became duly registered in Idaho in May of this year, and since that time it's grown to encompass 3 states and close to 2,000 members in, I believe it's 13 different communities so far. Got a lot of angry taxpayers and property owners out there.
Is there any effort afoot to try to broaden that base of membership?
Yeah, there is. We've been asked to have rallies in quite a few towns, really more towns than we've got volunteers to handle. So we do about 2 or 3 meetings a month in different communities.
Maybe we should try to set the stage for the rest of our discussions. Obviously, your organization is serious about what it's trying to accomplish, but I can see where there might be some people, particularly people who are city dwellers and who have access to regularly broadcast television programs or cable television, who would see this as a non-issue. Is it America's right to watch Wheel of Fortune and Dynasty, or is there something a lot more important involved here?
I see that is the reason why this is the most difficult thing to organize, because the rural people who are affected by scrambling are out in these remote areas that are very, very far away from a large urban area. For instance, Republic, Washington, Libby, Montana. These kinds of places are very far, and there are very few people living in these areas, but they are the most affected by them. Should city people care? I don't know if that's the issue. I think the issue is, should we care about the kind of information that is available to every citizen in this country? I don't particularly care if HBO, the movie channel, those kinds of things are scrambled. I don't really care. The thing that has attracted me to this group is that when you start scrambling things like 60 Minutes and Dan Rather's Evening News, I think that that's really important. I feel that people, especially rural people, need to have access to information. They need information to make political decisions, economic decisions, social decisions, those kinds of things that are provided by national news. I think we get in a real problem when PBS, which is funded by the taxpayers of this country, starts to scramble the people who pick it up by the satellite. So you're looking at people who live in the remote areas who make a valuable contribution to this country. The loggers, the miners, the farmers, those kinds of people have just as much right to be informed.
If I can follow up with one more quick question, it does make some sense for pay television providers like HBO or the Movie Channel to take a serious interest in making sure that people who aren't paying aren't viewing. What's the motivation behind public television and public broadcasting companies who supposedly send their signal out on the airwaves for anybody to receive? What's their motivation for scrambling their signal?
Well, it's public broadcasting has stated that it is to enhance the services that they deliver. Although before January of this year, PBS had stated that they would never scramble. And when some regulatory controls were taken off of cable in January 1987, in a month and a half, 175 public broadcasting stations were dropped from cable distribution around the country and replaced with home shopping networks that pay cable companies to distribute them. And all of a sudden PBS is scrambling. And no more public broadcasting stations have been dropped from cable since then. So there's quite a few reasons. The delivery, the enhanced delivery of the services is always nice to have, but there are safer ways to do it than outright scrambling the public airwaves. They say that they will always leave one feed. On satellite, there's quite a few public broadcasting feeds, a feed being a channel. They said that they will always leave the main channel open. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the country, either because of interference caused from other microwave sites or communications sites, may not be able to pick up the channel that feed is on. And a lot of people are just going to be denied totally public broadcasting as well as the networks.
John, I think it would be very helpful to the viewer if we dealt a little more with the technicalities. You're so close to this as some people are. It's very easy for us to assume that all viewers know exactly what is happening here. So I wish you would take a minute to explain, first, to even identify the parties on both sides and what scrambling is all about. Representative Givens has indicated that it affects the rural people who aren't close to cable, but would you just walk us through that process and how it does affect if you live in a city and you do have cable or you don't have cable? I just think we need more information for the viewer on the technicalities.
Pretty broad question. As Jeannie Givens stated, the HBOs and the non-commercialized stations and everything in scrambling, everybody agrees that if a corporation cannot make money, there will be no services that they can provide, first of all. There's never been any question that their services are valuable services. We're not saying that these people should not get paid. What Stop Scrambling Incorporated is doing is trying to protect the public's access to the airwaves, which, with the precedents being set, are coming upon us very rapidly. Pretty soon we won't have access to any public airwaves without paying a cable company for the use of.
Let's delve into that. You're indicating, for example, that people who have access to a cable company and they purchase cable, they have several options, and one option is to hook up to cable for the general programming of the major networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC, and there's some other channels, maybe the PBS channel. They can also subscribe to special stations, the Movie Channel, Home Box Office, and so forth. In other words, there's a series of options, but the first one, as I understand it, is you get several stations, including the main station.
Correct.
The scrambling decisions that have been made from CBS to start with, and then others, is indicating, as I believe Representative Givens is indicating, that we're moving beyond the special channels, such as the Movie Channel, Home Box Office, to where that gradually they may scramble to where if you don't subscribe to a cable company and you live in an area where they're not available, that you might not get any broadcasting at all?
Very, very true. It's already happening. Scrambling first came about with HBO. Time Life magazine owned home box office. They wanted to protect their signal from commercial theft. Commercial theft being hotels and motels that were receiving the signal, distributing it for pay with no reimbursement to HBO on a commercial level. In an attempt to protect that commercial right to their signal, they imposed scrambling. Even though at the time these hotels and motels approached HBO and offered to buy the signal from them, they refused to sell it. HBO all of a sudden found themselves in a difficulty of Holiday Inns using their delivered signal, and how do you make an outfit like Holiday Inn stop delivery of these services? So they imposed scrambling. When scrambling first happened, the thought, even within the satellite industry itself, the thought of any commercial network scrambling, of any regular network like CBS, any advertiser-supported channel, even the thought of that happening was unacceptable, and it was in no way even considered. It was not going to happen. This is 1.5 years ago. Since then, we've seen public broadcasting start to scramble. We've seen CBS start to scramble, and 6 other commercial networks that have scrambled. And the precedents that are being set here are very fast-acting situations.
You alluded earlier to the concept that when the federal government, through the FCC and support from the executive branch, decide that they would deregulate. We're going through a lot of discussion on deregulation in the public utilities and in communications and airlines and so forth. There are a lot of complaints by consumers that with that deregulation, all those fields, service has declined. There's a tremendous increase in complaints with the airlines. Are you indicating that if that deregulation had not taken place in the field of communications, that this scrambling would not have taken place or would not have been permitted by the regulations?
I would, on a personal level, have to say it would probably still have occurred. It probably wouldn't have occurred so rapidly and unjustly as it did. A monopoly in this country is against the law. Even our congressmen in Washington, D.C. call cable an unregulated monopoly. So, in fact, they are stating that they are a monopoly when it's not the small town cable companies that are causing these problems. First of all, they are having a hard time fighting for access to the signal, just like the dish owner is. It's the large, what we call MSOs, multiple system operators, that own 50 or 100 or 150 cable systems around the country, as well as newspapers and television stations that are causing these actions, multinational corporations that are causing these actions.
I have one more question before we go to Steve, and this is to Representative Givens. Since you're very involved in public policy and lawmaking as a state legislator, and you're married to an attorney whose great area of interest is civil rights and civil liberties and constitutional law, I wonder, first of all, have you had any communication with any of these networks and asked them that basic question? If you are successful in totally scrambling, what option do you propose for the rural people when they absolutely will not be able to get any broadcasting at all? That's the first part, if you've had that communication. Number two, if the answer to that is they don't have any remedy or solution, what kind of legal litigation are you talking about? What kind of constitutional arguments are you involved with in the case?
Those are really good questions, Tony. We are on the cutting edge. I mean, we are at the day-to-day breaking news of this issue because it's a new idea to scramble the television signal to rural people who have no other access to information is a new idea. No one else is suing them at this point. And so their actions are going unchecked right now. What I am interested in is seeing a theory of constitutional law be applied in this case with the Stop Scrambling group, and that is that it's the First Amendment, the freedom of information, freedom of speech, and those kinds of theories being used in the courts of this land. I think that the problem with the scrambling issue is that the cable industry is a very, very powerful lobby in Washington, D.C., and they have a lot of money, and they get directly involved in campaigns. So what we're seeing right now is people are compromising away on bills, and we're not seeing anything really substantial come out of Congress. So I think that at that case, when you've taken your cause to government and they haven't dealt with it, I think the second step is to go to the courts and see what can be done. Under the law, everyone is supposedly to be treated equal, and there should be some equal protection for everybody, whether you're a city dweller or a rural person. So I'm interested to see how a judge and a jury would handle this kind of an issue.
Are you suggesting, in addition to the First Amendment right of free speech and access to information, which applies to the 14th Amendment also in relation to states, that you might reach this also through discrimination, that rural people are being discriminated against, just like we have issues in race and sex and so forth?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because we are seeing here a class of people being treated totally different, just based upon where they live. And you look at situations where people need information. Say, for instance, emergency information. There was an earthquake up in British Columbia, or Mount St. Helens blew a couple years ago. Access to that kind of information is just as important for emergency services, for survival, to the rural person as it is to the city person. So I also feel very strongly that people need information to make economic decisions. When they're watching a football game and E.F. Hutton or Merrill Lynch is advertising, I feel that everybody needs to have that kind of access to economic information. If you see a commercial where Sears is advertising a sale on tires, and that very next day you're going to go out and buy tires, you have a little bit of an advantage by seeing those commercials when you make that kind of a purchase. So it's a very obtuse way of getting there, but television does provide economic information that's valuable, and it enhances our quality of life.
Steve Sheen.
Are there any legal parallels to what you're trying to do here? Obviously, this is new ground, mm-hmm. and the problem has arisen so recently. That's not surprising. But any precedent court-wise? Does your counsel have any reason to believe that this is something that can successfully be pursued in the courts?
Well, there really aren't any direct precedents relating to this situation. There's minor precedents in secondary situations, but nothing that directly steps in here. Well, a few of the main points that are going to be coming into play here is the taxpayers in this country put a dish on the moon before the satellites were made available for CBS to use to send their signal around the country. The American tax public, paying public, has hundreds of billions of dollars invested in this system, which we developed for rural America. And now that the system's up and perfected, it is literally being withheld from rural America. The people in the city will not realize it. They've been cableized, so to speak. They're on cable. They are dependent on cable. And they will not see these ramifications for another year and a half, when all of a sudden they lose their local television stations and they don't know why. And they're replaced with something cable decides to spoon feed them. What's really happening here is everybody is being denied, whether they're rural or city, they're being denied an alternative to cable. And unfortunately, as Jeannie stated earlier, that we're really getting no fair legislation even proposed in Congress, let alone debated. And it's quite a situation. Even the CBS, who in return for their broadcasting rights to make their service available to as many houses as possible, they're using a tax-developed scrambling system called the Video Cipher 1 technology, which was developed by our military. And it's not usable in the home. The homeowner cannot use it. They are literally depriving us of their signal. And CBS stated to our congressman in Washington, D.C. a year ago in some subcommittee hearings that that's a price rural America is going to have to pay for choosing to live in rural America.
Let me move to a slightly different area. Scrambling's a fact now, and if this does indeed become a court battle, unless the courts were to issue an injunction against scrambling while the case was being decided, it's probably going to be some time before there's a decision in this area. are some of the immediate consequences of scrambling in terms of the satellite dish industry and other possible economic consequences?
In the satellite dish industry, unfortunately, I'm in it and I'm seeing this firsthand. The original scrambling of satellite feeds, HBO in particular, knocked the satellite industry out 40% the first year. The second year, 80% of the remaining was hurt. And now when the networks start going down, really all you can do is speculate on it, but I think it's going to be devastating. The cable powers that be are already putting in plays to virtually take over the independent satellite industry, so that when a consumer, rural, urban, it doesn't matter, decides that they want a microwave communications earth station, which a satellite dish is, they're going to have to go and buy it from a cable company. So you're going to run into virtually the same situation as people on cable today are running into.
Representative Givens, if I could follow up, and I'm calling for a conclusion on the part of the witness, but what would you guess would be the result of the demise of satellite television as an option for rural people and people in cities? Some have opted to have that system rather than pay monthly cable charge. What would you guess the result might be in terms of eventual cable television costs?
I don't have a satellite dish, so I feel really at odds in discussing personally what I feel would happen. But there still are hundreds of channels that people can pick up on their satellite dish. So they still have so much more with the satellite dish than they ever would with cable. You're able to pick up programming from other countries and Canadian news, and as well as stereo options, music options. But the interesting thing, I received communication from Albert Gore, the fellow who happens to be running for president, and in one thing that he said that I thought was interesting, he said that the cable companies with this scrambling have really only bought themselves a few short years. What's going to happen is the technology of the satellite will continue to prosper. Just because you scramble doesn't mean that the technology is going to go away. So if you can imagine what these little computer wizards were able to do in hacking and building onto things, I think that American ingenuity is going to prevail, because this country is not built up or set up to deal very adequate with monopolies. It's anti-American. It just doesn't go within the grain of the American spirit. So I think that this is just a temporary setback. The court case can do something. Realistic, good legislation could help with the situation. But I don't think the satellite industry is dead by any means at all.
Representative Givens, along that line, since there's been a lot of deregulation and the federal government's removed itself partially from the process, although certainly they'll never do away with their role under the Commerce Clause in dealing with commerce, but since they have backed off in some way, is there anything that the state can do without violating the rights of the national government to regulate commerce, to at least in that state make it difficult and to protect the people from the scrambling?
I'm looking at a piece of legislation. I don't know how far it would go, but we could declare the state of Idaho as a scramble-free zone. Don't scramble in Idaho. And there surely are other states that fit the same kind of profile that Idaho has. Wyoming, Montana, eastern Washington, very rural areas where people live in these small communities. They're ranchers, they're farmers, they produce vegetables, and they're the breadbasket of the world. I think that the scrambling issue is an attractive legislative kind of issue.
I see some smile when you say that. I wonder if you think that CBS and others would challenge that law in federal court and have it declared unconstitutional, saying that whether or not you regulate interstate is a decision of the national government. If they choose not to, then the state can't move in. Do you think that is this a trial balloon? Or
This is a trial balloon, definitely. I wouldn't imagine that I could introduce a bill like that without a little objection from CBS.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but also receives some attention, though, doesn't it, of those who are engaged in this process, and so it might have the benefit of at least more open debate on the subject.
I think that the issue needs to be discussed because, as I said before, every day something new is happening with this industry, and it definitely is an issue that deserves to be discussed within the Idaho legislature.
John, I'd like to give you an opportunity to inform our viewers of how they can contact you. I gather from conversations that maybe the large networks are not standing with open arms wanting you to advertise so much about this issue. So on this program, we'd like to have all views, and we really open it up to contacts. Would you like to tell the viewers where you're located and how they can reach you if they have interest in the subject that you are dealing with in your corporation?
All right. Stop Scrambling Incorporated, their mailing address is in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho at Post Office Box 2007.
Oh, maybe you give that again, please.
Okay, Stop Scrambling Incorporated, Post Office Box 2007, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho 83814. You can contact us by mail at that address. Telephone number, Idaho area code 208-773-0323. And we're all volunteers, so if the phone doesn't get answered, call back.
You said you were gathering memberships, and could you also inform our viewers of upcoming function or activities? Now, this program won't air for a couple of weeks, but what are some of your plans that you have that they could be a part of in the near future?
Well, we're considering, Stop Scrambling Incorporated is considering sending a small delegation to the Satellite Trade Show in Nashville in the early part of September. Whether or not that happens is going to be up to the board of directors. We're also planning rallies in the Moses Lake area, Moscow and Lewiston, and Missoula, Montana, and quite a few areas that are being set up to do now. We've had some contact with Representative Swift out of Washington, who would like to come and attend a rally when we get into Western Washington a little farther. So there's a lot of activities to do, and the volunteer list needs to be lengthened. If there's any volunteers that want to get involved in this issue, give a call.
Representative Gibbons, I know you've been around long enough and involved enough activities to know that some finances are essential in any movement. And would you like to address the financial needs of your organization?
I'm working with John and the group in advising them. So we've been working on a direct mail scheme, which has been very, very good. The response is fantastic. However, the money, it takes initial seed money to get the big money, and so that's what the group is doing right now. Contributions can be sent to that same address, Post Office Box 2007, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho 83814.
On that note, we're going to bring the program to a conclusion, and on behalf of Steve Shink and our staff, we thank you both for coming by today and discussing what is really an interesting and important issue. Ladies and gentlemen, our guests have been John Caldwell, who is the president of the board of directors of Stop Scrambling Incorporated, and a consultant to that organization, State Representative Jeannie Gibbons from Kootenai County in the state of Idaho. Hope you've enjoyed this program and you found the subject stimulating and important to you. And I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time when we will discuss what we believe is an important issue. I would also like to invite you to write to us on any subject. We respond to all inquiries, and we are very appreciative of your input at any time. Until next week, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.